So Blackwater is one of those jump scare movies that came out a few years ago. Now the movie is about three friends that take a river cruise, and during that cruise they get attacked by a giant crocodile. They survive by climbing a tree and then try to find a way to get out of the crocodile's territory. Now this movie is based off of actual events that happened over in Australia. On December 21st, 2003, 22-year-old Brett Mans and his two friends Ashley Magoo and Sean Blowers, who are both 19 years old, and yes, his name is actually Ashley, and in most countries it's a unisex name. They went to a place known as Kangaroo Flats, which is a flat salt plains that's located about 80 kilometers southwest of Darwin, Australia. It's the ideal place for them to do what's called mucking about on their quad bikes, and for those that don't know what mucking about is, it's the equivalent of mudding. Now the trio spent the whole entire day going around spraying each other with mud until they decided around 4:30 that it's time to go, so they went down to the river to wash themselves off. So when they reached the Fenness River, they noticed the river was extremely high, as well as the current was really strong. So they traveled a little ways down the river trying to find a spot that was a little bit calmer, and when they found one, they decided to wash themselves off with. They had stated that Brett had walked a little bit further out to clean himself off. They weren't sure if he lost his footing or got swept away, but he ended up winding down the river. And both Sean and Ashley jumped in after him, trying to get him back to shore. Now they checked on each other to make sure everybody was okay, that nobody was hurt, and they all was fine. And there was no alarm that anything bad was happening until Ashley started yelling, "Croc, Croc, I'm not joking, get to the trees!" They started swimming frantically trying to get to the tree line. Sean would say that he was the first one that got to the tree, climbed up it, turned around, grabbed Ashley, pulled them up. When they looked around, they couldn't find Brett anywhere. And after looking, they went ahead and looked down and noticed that the crocodile was right beneath them with Brett in his mouth. You notice he was in the jaws, but he was laying face down. But the only reason they knew it was Brett was because of his riding gear that he was wearing that day. They said the crocodile sat there for maybe a couple minutes with Brett still in his jaws before it finally swam away, but then returned 5 minutes later and just sat there and stared at them the whole entire time. Now both Sean and Ashley would talk about their ordeal of what happened that night because they ended up having to stay the night in that tree. They were working with each other, trying to keep each other awake. Even at one point, Sean had tried to move higher up on the tree and had fell back into the water, but he quickly climbed back out before the crocodile could even get to him. And as night fell, the temperature got colder, so they actually huddled with each other to stay warm. And because they was out in the wilderness and it was pitch black out there, they had to announce when they were moving so that way the other person was aware of what was going on. The boys were going to say that it was very exhausting holding to a tree because during the nighttime it was both windy and raining the whole entire time they was out there. Now the boys were supposed to return back that day around 7:30 p.m. but when they failed to return, their families had called the authorities, which sent out a search party to try to locate them. Now they found their quad bikes, but they realized that the boys weren't around, and that's when they realized that there was even more trouble than they were. But due to it getting dark and the rough terrain, they were not able to launch a search party until the next morning. Now the next morning, the search party had returned back to the area and started searching for the boys, trying to see if they could locate them and yelling their names out. They managed to hear back their replies, and so when they got to the area, the boys let them know like, "Hey, there's a crocodile, you need to be careful." In a rescue attempt they tried to use a helicopter to retrieve the boys, but they scratched that idea because they realized that there was a chance that with the wind from the propellers, it would have knocked the boys into the water and into the mouth of the crocodile. So instead what they did was they used the sound of the helicopter to chase the crocodile away and used a small boat to try to retrieve the boys and get them out of a tree. Now both Sean and Ashley would go ahead and survive their ordeal, but Brett's body was never found.